Hey there BookTube, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing the grab 10 books from your shelves and gab tag, I think. Finding 10 books on my shelves that I've never talked about here on this channel was a bit challenging because most of the books that I've bought recently, since I started my channel anyway, have appeared on my channel either in a book haul where I showed you the books that I bought or a review if I read it. I've been doing a closer book series, or when I'm doing a tag like this one, I'll go through my shelves and I'll show you a book that maybe I never showed you before, but it's a book that is meaningful to me in one way or another. So finding 10 books that I've never mentioned on this channel before, I don't know, it was a little challenging. So if you see something that you can remember me talking about, then you can go ahead and call me out on it. But I'm going to tell you 10 books and why I have them. First up is, I'm going to start kind of chronologically in terms of how long I've had them. First up would be Sidney Sheldon, Master of the Game. I used to be a huge Sidney Sheldon fan. The Other Side of Midnight was my favorite Sidney Sheldon book. I really enjoyed the way Sidney Sheldon wove a good story and brought people who you thought were villains and their complicated backstories into focus. I really enjoyed Sidney Sheldon's writings when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. This book was published in 1982. It is brown, it is yellowed, it is bad. The reason that this has probably never showed up in any of my bookshelf tours or any other videos is that I have a small stash of mass market paperbacks behind my other more beautiful books. This book I know takes place in South Africa, and the family that we are reading about, they are wealthy from the diamond industry, and there is some drama that happens in the family. And in true Sidney Sheldon style, there is romance, there is intrigue, there is drama, there is betrayal, there is murder. Yeah. I should probably reread this just so I can tell you a little bit more about it. It's 488 pages. Another mass market paperback that I have is one of the first mass market paperback crime thriller books that I ever bought. And I remember the day when I bought this book. I'd gone to a store in, I'd gone to the town in Jamaica, Mandeville. I'd gone there to take an exam, and after the exam, me and my mom and I think my brother was there, and we all went down to the town, down to the shopping center to do a little celebration. And I bought this book because my exams were over and I could now focus on some fiction. And I remember buying this book and really enjoying it because it was mine. It wasn't a library book. It was a book that I had chosen simply for the joy of it. This one takes place in the United Kingdom. It has to do with the conflict between Ireland and Scotland. And it's about these two brothers. One is waiting for the other when there's a bus explosion. And after the explosion, the brother, the scientist, he is forced to face the fact that he probably doesn't know his brother as well as he thinks he does as an adult. Like, you know, you grow up, you think that you and your siblings, you're so similar, but then at some point, or your friends, you grow up with people and you think you know them, but at some point your life follows very different trajectories, and you have to come to the place where you realize that you don't know people as well as you thought you did. And this book deals with that. It shows the conflict very well. And again, brown, yellowed with age. It's one of the few books that I brought with me from Jamaica, and so I hold on to this book, and I'll probably talk more about it someday when I reread it and I can share a little bit more about the synopsis of the story. Another book that I have had for a really long time, let's see. Hiking and Backpacking, a Trailside Guide by Karen Berger is a book that I bought when I was about to do my certification for my Master Guide course. In order to become a Master Guide, you have to be trained and certified as a camping, hiking, backpacking expert. And this was a book that I bought to study when I was going through that certification. Before I'd gone on my first backpacking trip, I wanted to make sure that I had all the information, all the details. I was ready for whatever the trail brought to me. Another book that I've had for a really long time is Sidney Poitier's memoir, The Measure of a Man. Sidney Poitier, you know, is very famous for being the first African-American Academy Award winner. He won an Academy Award for Lilies of the Field in 1963. This book was first published in 2000. This is pre-Denzel Washington winning the Academy Award for Training Day. So at the time this was published, Sidney Poitier was still the only African American man who had won an Academy Award. Oprah recommended this book. Oprah is obsessed with this man, or at least she was back when I used to watch Oprah's show. And I read this book. I bought it. It was one of the few books that I bought full price when I was in college, because when you're in college you have to save your book money for textbooks. And I loved this book. In it, he talks about growing up in the Caribbean. Where does he grow up? He grew up in Bahamas. So not quite the Caribbean, but, you know, a third world country. So he talks about the many instances that now as an adult he can look back and say, this was a moment where I could have died. That was a moment where I could have died. It is a miracle that I survived to become an adult. He talks about that so well, and it was just so familiar to me. I really love this memoir. He's also a very spiritual person, so at the bottom it does say it's a spiritual autobiography, because he talks about his faith. He talks about his life not being random, about, you know, coming into his purpose and realizing what his life should be about. I love this book. Recommend it. Another autobiography that I have is Hillary Rodham Clinton's Living History. And this one is another book that I bought when I was in college, which was pretty rare. As you can see, I got it for 20% off. I remember buying it from the college bookstore and getting that discount. So $28 with 20% off was still a lot of money when you're a college student struggling to not eat ramen noodles every day for dinner. But I read this book and it's so interesting. I still have my little bookmark in here. My bookmark is from Harley Quinn. So this one was published in 2003, after the Clintons' 8 years in the White House, after the Monica Lewinsky scandal, after the impeachment trials, after everything had gone down. But also, long before we knew that Mrs. Clinton was going to run for president. So she has a new book out. She has a new autobiography out. And I haven't read that one yet, but I think it will be interesting to make comparisons between how she speaks about herself here and how she speaks about herself in that new book. Her political career didn't end the way she thought it would, didn't end the way a lot of people thought it would. I don't think that she will or can run for president again. I mean, she has lost now to Barack Obama and Donald Trump. I don't think that she would run again, or that the Democratic Party would even select her as their candidate. But she did a lot to impact history. She did a lot to make us know who she is and acknowledge her positions. She's done a lot in her life, and so she is living history. When I thought that she was going to win and become the first female president of the United States, I was happy that I had this book already, because I was reading or collecting biographies about presidents and their first ladies, which I'll talk about soon. I was collecting and reading biographies and autobiographies of presidents. I have both of the books that Barack Obama published. I've read books by the Bushes, and, you know, I thought, here we have this lady. She's going to be president. She's going to be right there in my presidential collection. Sad that she didn't win, but I'm still glad that I have this, because now it will help my First Lady collection, which there is no doubt that she was First Lady. And my other First Lady book is Eleanor, a novel by Rhoda Lerman. And this one, it says at the top, a reality truer and more haunting than the most scrupulous notes of the biographer distinguished historical fiction. So this is historical fiction based on the life of Eleanor Roosevelt, but with like creative nonfiction of her life. I had an opportunity to visit the Presidential Library of the Roosevelts up in Hyde Park, and it was, yes, you're there to see the notes and the archives of Franklin Roosevelt, but Eleanor Roosevelt was such a complicated, interesting character that I need to read this book. I've owned this copy for probably 10 years and I've never opened it. I've never read it, and now I want to really bad. When I was in college, I would walk through, there's a building that I would walk through where the professors would frequently put out books that they no longer wanted or needed, and they'd put them out on tables in the hallways, and if you walked by and you saw a book that you liked, you could just take it. That's where I got this book from. at some point I figured I would read it. You know, hard to read those kinds of books during the semester, but I said I'm going to hold on to it, and at some point I'm going to read it. The time hasn't come yet, but now I'm intrigued. I want to read more from her. One of the things that just stuck out to me, she used to publish an article in a newspaper 6 days a week, every week, for years. The articles would be about her life in the White House, her life just as First Lady. Eleanor Roosevelt was a blogger. So that just made me think, you know, here was this woman who, she didn't have the technology that we have today. She didn't have internet and computers, and she could type from her smartphone. She would sit someplace and either write by longhand or maybe even a typewriter and publish these articles every day, 6 days a week, every week, for years. She makes me inspired to write more. Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm glad that I found it on my shelves and I'm able to share it with you now, but we will talk more about this once I've read it. Talking about strong women, we have Headstrong, 52 Women Who Changed Science and the World. I got this one maybe about 2 years ago, and it is just short essays on these women who were influential in our world. There are essays here about women that we already know. People like Sally Ride, Florence Nightingale, Irene Joliot-Curie, but there are lots of other names that you might not be so familiar with. I got it from a publisher to do a review, and I did a review on it, but I could stand to do another thumb through. Another book that I have that is pretty inspirational is The Pact, and this one is by Doctors Samson Davis, George Jenkins, and Ramek Hunt. These are 3 doctors who started off as young men growing up in the inner cities, and they all made a pact with each other that regardless of the circumstances that they were living in, they were all going to succeed. They were all going to support each other in their quest to become doctors, to become successful doctors. And years later, when they reached their goals, they got together and wrote this book. I got a couple of copies years ago, and I've given them away to several young people that I have talked to and mentored over the years. And I think this is one of, I think I might have another one someplace. And I'm always trying to give this book, especially to young guys, young men who I feel like, you know, are going through some of the same situations that these men faced, and how they can envision a better life for themselves and work towards their goals. The Pact. Another book that is from my relationship with young people is The Weston Game by Ellen Raskin. This is a book that I got when I was teaching in the public school system in New York, and it's a kid's book. It's a story about an eccentric billionaire who is a game player and who might or might not be dead, but is also still playing a game that involves his neighbors. Not my usual genre of books to read and enjoy and recommend, but I absolutely love this book. I think it is worthy of your attention. If you've never read it, I recommend that you check it out. It's pretty short. It's a book that you could read in an afternoon. It's only a little over 200 pages, and it is written for children, so the language is very easy to read, and love this book. And finally, a book that I don't think I've ever talked about here, even though I probably should, is a book that I've owned for several years. I bought this to give it to someone, and I decided to keep it. It's the Mona Lisa Stratagem, The Art of Women, Age and Power by Harriet Rubin. The target audience for this book is women, middle age and above. It's a book that I have thumbed through when I have gone through my own periods of, you know, unhappiness as the years go by. So I recommend it. I probably don't talk about it enough. I don't think I ever mentioned it on this channel, but if I have, I recommend it anyway. So those are 10 books. Those are 10 books from my shelves that I don't usually talk about, that I wanted to share with you. Thanks for watching this video. If I talked about a book here today that you would like to hear more about, a book that you have read and want to chat about, go ahead and leave me a comment down below and we'll talk about it down there. So until next time, happy reading. Bye.